The darkness outside Adelaide Cottage was still thick when Prince William opened his eyes at 4:30 in the morning. He had not really been sleeping anyway. For the past hour he had been lying in his warm bed staring up at the white ceiling above him. His mind was racing with thoughts about this very special day. Today was not just any ordinary day. Today his father Charles would become King Charles III, and William himself would officially become the heir to the throne of England. The house was very quiet around him. Only the soft sound of his wife Kate breathing beside him broke the silence. Her beautiful auburn hair was spread across her pillow like a fan. She looked so peaceful sleeping there. William turned his head to look at her and felt grateful to have her by his side on such an important day. He knew she was just as nervous as he was about everything that would happen today. Suddenly Kate stirred in the bed next to him. Her green eyes opened slowly, and she looked at William with a gentle smile. Her voice was soft and sleepy when she whispered to him, "Big day today, my love." William nodded his head and reached over to squeeze her warm hand in his. They both knew that today would change their family forever in ways they could barely imagine. From somewhere down the hallway they could hear the sound of their oldest son George moving around in his bedroom. The 9-year-old boy had been awake for quite some time now. He had been lying in his own bed, thinking about his very important job today. George would be serving as a page boy during the coronation ceremony. This meant he would have special duties to perform in front of thousands of people and cameras from around the world. For weeks and weeks, George had been practicing his ceremonial duties. He had learned exactly how to walk slowly and carefully. He had practiced carrying the heavy royal robes without dropping them. He had memorized every step he needed to take during the long ceremony. Even though he was only 9 years old, George understood how important his role would be today. Down the hall in another bedroom, 7-year-old Princess Charlotte was probably already awake too. She had been excited about this day for many months. Charlotte had been looking forward to wearing her special white dress and her very own small tiara. She had tried on her outfit many times and loved how pretty she looked in it. Charlotte was not nervous like her big brother George. Instead, she was filled with excitement and joy about the celebration ahead. In the smallest bedroom at the end of the hallway, 4-year-old Prince Louis was still fast asleep. The little boy was curled up under his blankets, completely unaware that today would be one of the most important days in his family's history. Louis was too young to fully understand what a coronation meant. He did not realize that his grandfather would become the King of England today. He did not know that thousands of people would be watching their family on television sets around the world. William slowly got out of bed and walked to the window. He pulled back the heavy curtains and looked out at the dark morning sky. Even though it was still very early, he could see that people were already gathering on the streets of London. Some had been camping out all night just to get a good spot to watch the royal procession. The dedication of these people always amazed William and made him feel humble. Kate sat up in bed and stretched her arms above her head. She looked at William standing by the window and could see the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Today he would stop being just a son watching his father and would become the official heir to the throne. The thought made her heart beat faster with both pride and worry for the man she loved so much. Kate moved through the morning routine with the skill of a mother who had done this many times before. But today everything felt completely different from any other morning. The air in the house seemed to buzz with excitement and nervous energy. She could hear William in the bathroom getting ready, while she prepared to help their 3 children get dressed for the most important day of their young lives. First, she went to George's bedroom. Her eldest son was already standing in front of his mirror trying to fix his hair. George had been awake for over an hour now, and his face looked serious beyond his 9 years. His ceremonial outfit was laid out carefully on his bed. The special page boy uniform was made of rich red velvet with gold buttons that gleamed in the morning light. The jacket had been tailored perfectly to fit his small frame. Kate helped George put on the heavy ceremonial clothing piece by piece. The fabric felt important and weighty in her hands. As she buttoned up his jacket, George stood very still like a little soldier. His eyes were wide with worry, and Kate could see that he was thinking hard about everything he needed to do today. "Mummy, what if I drop something during the ceremony?" George asked quietly. His voice was small and uncertain. Kate could hear the fear hiding behind his words. She immediately knelt down so she was at the same level as her son. Looking into his worried brown eyes, she spoke in her most gentle and reassuring voice. "You will not drop anything, sweetheart. You have practiced your duties so many times over the past few weeks. Just remember to walk slowly and keep your eyes on Grandpa Charles. He will be there to guide you if you need help." Kate smoothed down George's hair and gave him an encouraging smile. She could see some of the tension leave his small shoulders. Next, Kate went to Charlotte's bedroom. Her 7-year-old daughter was already awake and sitting on her bed looking absolutely delighted. Charlotte's special white dress hung on the closet door like a beautiful cloud. The dress was made of the finest silk and had tiny pearls sewn along the neckline. It was the most beautiful dress Charlotte had ever owned. "Mummy, can I put on my tiara now?" Charlotte asked with sparkling eyes. She had been dreaming about wearing a real tiara for months. Kate laughed softly at her daughter's excitement. It was wonderful to see Charlotte so happy and carefree, while George was feeling so much pressure. Kate helped Charlotte into her dress and watched as her daughter spun around in front of the mirror. The white fabric flowed and moved like water around Charlotte's legs. The little girl looked like a real princess from a fairy tale book. When Kate placed the small silver tiara on Charlotte's head, the child gasped with pure joy. "I look like a real princess, Mummy," Charlotte said with wonder in her voice. Kate felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at her beautiful daughter. Charlotte did indeed look like a princess, and today she would be acting as one in front of the whole world. Finally, Kate went to the smallest bedroom, where 4-year-old Louis was just waking up. The little boy was still rubbing his sleepy eyes when William came in to help get him ready. Louis sat on his bed, looking confused about why everyone was getting dressed up so early in the morning. "Why do we have to get up so early, Papa?" Louis yawned as William helped him into his smart little suit. William chuckled at his youngest son's innocent question. Louis had no idea how special today would be. "Because today is very special, buddy. Today Grandpa Charles becomes the king of our country," William explained patiently while fixing Louis's tiny tie. The morning sun was beginning to rise over London as the royal family prepared to leave Adelaide Cottage. William looked at his watch and felt his heart beat faster. It was time to go to Westminster Abbey for the coronation ceremony. He took a deep breath and tried to calm his nerves. Today would change everything for his family, and he wanted to be strong for his wife and children. Kate appeared at the top of the stairs looking absolutely stunning in her elegant blue dress. She had chosen the color carefully because it was one of her father-in-law's favorite shades. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore a beautiful diamond necklace that had belonged to William's mother, Princess Diana. William felt a surge of love and pride as he watched his wife walk down the stairs with such grace and dignity. The children gathered in the hallway, all dressed in their ceremonial outfits. George looked very handsome in his red velvet page boy uniform. Charlotte was practically glowing with excitement in her white silk dress and sparkling tiara. Little Louis looked adorable in his miniature suit, even though he was still yawning from being woken up so early. Outside the cottage, several black cars were waiting for them. The cars had been specially prepared for this important journey. Each vehicle was polished until it gleamed like a mirror. The royal protection officers stood nearby ready to escort the family safely to Westminster Abbey. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. The family climbed into their assigned car, and William felt a wave of emotion wash over him as they began to drive through the streets of London. Everywhere he looked there were people. Thousands and thousands of people lined every street waving flags and cheering loudly. The crowds were bigger than anything William had ever seen before. Some people had been waiting since midnight just to catch a glimpse of the royal family. George pressed his face against the car window, and his eyes grew wide with amazement. "Look at all the people, Papa," he exclaimed. "There are so many of them." William smiled at his son's wonder. It was incredible to see how many people had come out to celebrate this historic day. The love and support from the British people was overwhelming. Charlotte was waving enthusiastically at everyone they passed. She had rolled down her window slightly so she could wave her small hand at the crowds. The people on the streets waved back at her and shouted words of encouragement. Charlotte was having the time of her life, being the center of so much attention. She loved seeing all the colorful flags and hearing the happy cheers. Louis was more interested in the horses that were pulling the ceremonial carriages ahead of them. The beautiful animals were decorated with golden harnesses and colorful plumes. "Look at the pretty horses, Mama," Louis said, pointing excitedly. Kate smiled and explained that these were very special horses that only came out for the most important royal occasions. As they drove through the historic streets of London, William found himself thinking about his mother, Princess Diana. He wished she could be here today to see her grandsons taking part in such an important ceremony. Diana would have been so proud of George and his important role as page boy. She would have loved seeing Charlotte looking so beautiful in her princess dress, and she would have laughed at Louis and his innocent questions about everything around him. Kate seemed to read William's thoughts because she reached over and took his hand in hers. She squeezed it gently and gave him a look that said she understood exactly what he was feeling. The weight of history and family tradition felt very heavy on William's shoulders today. He was no longer just a son watching his father's big day. He was now the Prince of Wales and the future King of England. The ancient stone walls of Westminster Abbey seemed to glow with a special light as the royal family stepped inside. William felt his breath catch in his throat as he looked around the magnificent building. The Abbey was filled with the most important people from around the entire world. Kings and queens from distant countries sat alongside presidents and prime ministers. Everyone had come to witness this historic moment when Charles would become King Charles III. William guided his family carefully to their seats in the very front row. These were the most important seats in the entire Abbey. From here, they would have the perfect view of the coronation ceremony. George walked beside his father with very careful steps. The little boy's eyes were huge as he took in all the incredible sights around him. The soaring stone arches of the Abbey reached up toward heaven like giant arms. Colorful stained glass windows told stories of kings and saints from centuries past. The light streaming through the glass painted rainbow patterns on the ancient floor. George had never seen anything so beautiful and impressive in his entire young life. He felt very small in this enormous sacred space. Charlotte whispered quietly to her mother about how pretty everything looked. The little girl was amazed by all the flowers that decorated the Abbey. Thousands of white roses and golden daffodils had been arranged in perfect displays. The sweet smell of the flowers mixed with the old stone scent of the building created something magical. Charlotte felt like she was inside a fairy tale palace. Louis fidgeted in his seat, feeling overwhelmed by all the people and noise around him. The 4-year-old had never been in such a crowded place before. Everywhere he looked there were unfamiliar faces staring back at him. The sound of hundreds of people talking and moving echoed off the stone walls. Kate put her arm around Louis and whispered soothing words to help him feel more comfortable. William remembered being in this same Abbey over 40 years ago for his parents' wedding. He had been just a small child then, watching his mother and father promise to love each other forever. Now he was here as a grown man and a father himself. His own children were about to witness history being made in this sacred place. The circle of life and royal tradition felt very powerful in this moment. Near the front of the Abbey sat the golden throne where Charles would soon be crowned. The coronation chair was over 700 years old and had been used to crown kings and queens for centuries. The ancient wood was dark with age and carved with intricate designs. This chair had supported the weight of English royalty through wars and peace, triumph and tragedy. The organ music began to play, and the sound filled every corner of the massive building. The deep notes seemed to vibrate through the stone floor and up into William's chest. Everyone in the Abbey stood up at the same time as the music announced that King Charles was about to enter. The moment they had all been waiting for was finally here. George straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. His page boy duties were about to begin, and he wanted to make his family proud. Charlotte smoothed down her white dress and adjusted her tiara. She wanted to look perfect for this special ceremony. Louis clung to his mother's hand, feeling nervous about all the important people around them. William felt tears starting to form in his eyes as he prepared to watch his father become king. This was the moment Charles had been preparing for his entire life. After waiting for over 70 years, Charles would finally take his place on the throne of England. The Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward in his magnificent white and gold robes. His voice rang out clear and strong across the silent abbey as he began the ancient coronation service. These were words that had been spoken for over 1,000 years to crown the kings and queens of England. William felt chills run down his spine as he listened to the sacred ceremony that would transform his father into King Charles III. Charles stood tall and dignified at the front of the abbey. He had waited his entire life for this moment, and now it was finally happening. The future king looked calm and ready, even though William knew his father must be feeling enormous emotions inside. Charles had spent over 70 years preparing to take on the responsibility of being king. Now that moment of destiny had arrived. George stepped forward when it was time for his page boy duties. The 9-year-old boy walked slowly and carefully, just like he had practiced so many times. He carried the heavy ceremonial robes without making a single mistake. William's heart swelled with pride as he watched his eldest son handle such an important responsibility. George looked like a little prince himself as he performed his duties perfectly. The golden crown sat on a special cushion nearby, waiting for the most important moment of the ceremony. The Stedward's crown was made of solid gold and decorated with precious jewels that sparkled in the abbey's light. This crown had been used to crown kings for hundreds of years. Soon it would be placed on Charles's head, and he would officially become the king. Charlotte sat quietly in her seat with her eyes fixed on the beautiful crown. She had never seen anything so magnificent and special. The little girl was amazed by how the jewels caught the light and sent tiny rainbows dancing across the abbey walls. Charlotte understood that she was watching something very important happen. Her grandfather was about to become the most important person in their entire country. Even little Louis seemed to understand that something special was happening. The 4-year-old boy stayed unusually calm and quiet during the long ceremony. He watched everything with wide, curious eyes. Louis might not have understood all the big words being spoken, but he could feel that this was a very serious and important time. The Archbishop lifted the heavy golden crown high above Charles's head. The entire abbey fell completely silent as everyone held their breath. This was the moment they had all come to see. William felt his heart beating fast as he watched his father about to be crowned king. Time seemed to stand still as the crown was slowly lowered onto Charles's head. When the crown touched Charles's head, he was no longer just a prince. He was now King Charles III of England. The transformation was complete, and William felt tears of joy running down his cheeks. His father had finally achieved his life's purpose, and William could not have been more proud. The congregation erupted in the traditional cry of "God Save the King," and William's voice was the loudest of all. He shouted the words with all his heart because he truly meant them. He wanted God to bless and protect his father as he took on this enormous responsibility. The sound of thousands of voices shouting together filled the abbey with power and emotion. George completed his page boy duties perfectly without dropping anything or making any mistakes. When the ceremony was finished, King Charles caught his grandson's eye and gave him a proud smile and a little wink. George beamed with happiness, knowing that he had done his job well and made his family proud. Charlotte clapped her hands together with delight when she saw her grandfather wearing the beautiful crown. The little girl was so excited that she could barely sit still in her seat. She whispered to her mother about how handsome Grandpa looked as the new king. William wiped away his tears and smiled broadly. His father was now officially the King of England, and William himself was now officially the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. During a quiet moment in the ceremony, King Charles looked across the abbey and caught William's eye. The newly crowned king gave his son a smile that said everything without needing any words. It was a look filled with gratitude and love, and the weight of responsibility passing from father to son. Charles was thanking William for being there and for supporting him through this incredible journey to the throne. William nodded back at his father with complete understanding. He could see in his father's eyes all the emotions that Charles was feeling in this historic moment. There was relief that the long wait was finally over. There was joy at achieving his life's dream. There was also concern about the enormous responsibility he was now taking on as king. William wanted his father to know that he would always be there to support him. The connection between father and son was so strong that it seemed to bridge the distance across the massive abbey. Even though hundreds of people sat between them, Charles and William felt like they were the only two people in the room for that special moment. It was a private family moment happening in the middle of the most public ceremony imaginable. George had been watching this exchange between his father and grandfather with great interest. The 9-year-old boy was learning about the bonds that connected the royal family across generations. When George successfully completed another part of his page boy duties without any mistakes, King Charles gave his grandson a proud wink that made the little boy's face light up with happiness. Charlotte noticed the wink that her grandfather gave to George, and she giggled softly behind her hand. The 7-year-old girl thought it was funny and sweet that Grandpa was being playful even during such a serious ceremony. Charlotte's quiet giggle made Kate smile as she watched her daughter enjoying this special family moment. These little interactions were what made the grand ceremony feel personal and real. Louis had grown tired from all the excitement and the early morning start. The 4-year-old boy had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder, completely exhausted by everything that was happening around him. Kate gently stroked Louis's soft hair while keeping her eyes fixed on the historic ceremony unfolding before them. She loved how peaceful Louis looked sleeping in her arms during such an important moment. Kate felt overwhelmed by the significance of what was happening to their family. Her husband was now officially the heir to the throne, and her children were now directly in line to become future kings and queens. The weight of this realization made her hold Louis a little tighter as she thought about what the future might bring for all of them. William caught Kate's eye and gave her a reassuring smile. He could see that she was feeling emotional about everything that was changing for their family. William wanted Kate to know that they would face whatever challenges came their way together as a team. Their love and partnership would help them handle the new responsibilities that came with their elevated royal status. The ancient words of the coronation service continued to echo through the abbey, but William found himself focusing more on these precious family moments. These were the memories he knew he would treasure forever. Not just the grand pageantry and ceremony, but the small personal connections that made this historic day feel meaningful on a human level. George stood a little straighter when he realized that many people in the abbey were watching him perform his duties. The young boy felt proud to be representing his family so well. He understood that he was not just helping with his grandfather's coronation, but was also showing the world that the next generation of royals was ready to serve. Charlotte waved at some of the other children who were attending the ceremony with their royal parents. She was excited to see other young people who understood what it was like to be part of a royal family. The connections between royal families from different countries were strengthened by moments like these when children could share in the wonder of such grand occasions. The ceremony continued with its ancient rituals and sacred promises, but the family moments happening within it made everything feel more intimate and personal despite the massive scale of the event. After the magnificent ceremony ended, the royal family made their way through the corridors of Westminster Abbey toward the waiting carriages. The children were getting tired from the long morning, but their excitement returned when they realized they were heading to Buckingham Palace for the traditional balcony appearance. This was the moment when the newly crowned king would show himself to his people gathered outside the palace. The carriage ride back to the palace felt completely different from their journey to the abbey that morning. Now Charles was officially King Charles III, and the golden crown sat securely on his head. William felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness as he realized that he was now officially the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours. When they arrived at Buckingham Palace, William could hear the enormous crowd gathered in front of the building even before they got out of their carriages. The sound was like nothing he had ever experienced before. Thousands and thousands of people were cheering and calling out for the new king. The noise was so loud it seemed to make the very walls of the palace vibrate with excitement. George held his grandfather's hand tightly as they prepared to step onto the famous balcony. The 9-year-old boy had performed his page boy duties perfectly during the ceremony, but now he felt nervous about appearing in front of such a massive crowd. King Charles squeezed his grandson's hand reassuringly and whispered that everything would be fine. Charlotte was practically bouncing with excitement as they walked toward the balcony doors. The 7-year-old girl had been dreaming about this moment for weeks. She loved the idea of waving to all the people who had come to celebrate her grandfather's coronation. Charlotte had been practicing her royal wave in the mirror at home, and she was ready to show it off to the world. Louis was wide awake now after his nap during the ceremony. The 4-year-old boy was amazed by all the noise coming from outside the palace. He had never heard so many people cheering and shouting at the same time. Louis was curious to see what was causing all the excitement, and he tugged on his mother's dress, asking if they could go outside. The moment they stepped onto the balcony, the crowd erupted in the loudest cheer William had ever heard. The sea of people stretched as far as the eye could see down the Mall and into St. James's Park. British flags waved everywhere like a red, white, and blue ocean. The sight was absolutely incredible and took William's breath away completely. George stood close to his grandfather, looking out at the massive crowd with wide eyes. The little boy had never imagined that so many people could gather in one place. King Charles put his arm around George's shoulders and pointed out different sections of the crowd to help his grandson feel more comfortable with all the attention. Charlotte waved enthusiastically at the people below with both hands moving back and forth in perfect royal fashion. The crowd loved seeing the little princess, and they cheered even louder when they saw her beautiful white dress and sparkling tiara. Charlotte felt like a real princess from a storybook as she smiled and waved at her adoring public. Louis clapped his hands with pure delight when he saw all the people cheering for his family. The 4-year-old boy thought it was like the biggest party he had ever seen. He started waving at the crowd too, copying his sister's movements. The people loved seeing the youngest prince, and they waved back at him with equal enthusiasm. The Royal Air Force flew overhead in perfect formation, just as they had planned. The red arrows left trails of red, white, and blue smoke across the bright sky above London. Louis pointed up at the planes and clapped even harder. Even serious George broke into a huge smile when he saw the spectacular air display above them. William and Kate stood behind their children, ready to help if any of them felt overwhelmed by the enormous crowd. They watched with pride as all 3 children handled the public attention with grace and natural charm. The crowd roared with approval every time one of the children waved or smiled. King Charles raised his hand to acknowledge his people, and the cheering became even louder if that was possible. This was his moment of triumph after waiting over 70 years to become king. The love and support from the British people was overwhelming and deeply moving for the new monarch. Away from all the cameras and crowds, the royal family gathered in one of Buckingham Palace's private dining rooms for a quiet celebration. The formal part of the day was over, and now they could finally relax and enjoy some precious family time together. King Charles had changed out of his heavy ceremonial robes into a comfortable dark blue suit. Without all the formal regalia, he looked more relaxed than he had appeared all day. The private dining room was much smaller and cozier than the grand staterooms where official functions were held. Soft afternoon light streamed through tall windows that looked out over the palace gardens. A beautiful lunch had been prepared with all of the family's favorite foods. The atmosphere felt warm and intimate after the grandeur and formality of the morning ceremony. George was still buzzing with excitement about how well his page boy duties had gone. The 9-year-old boy could hardly contain himself as he told his grandfather about how nervous he had been before the ceremony started. "I was so worried I might drop the robes, Grandpa, But I remembered to walk slowly, just like we practiced, George said with pride shining in his young eyes. King Charles listened to his grandson with complete attention and genuine interest. You did absolutely perfectly, George. I was so proud watching you today. You looked like a real prince up there, the new king said warmly. George beamed with happiness at his grandfather's praise. This was the kind of personal recognition that meant more to him than all the cheering crowds. Charlotte was still wearing her beautiful white dress and sparkling tiara because she did not want to take them off yet. The 7-year-old girl kept touching the tiara gently to make sure it was still there. She showed off her outfit to everyone who would look and spun around to make the silk fabric flow like water around her legs. Look how pretty I am, Grandpa, Charlotte said as she did another graceful spin. King Charles chuckled at her innocent vanity and told her she was the most beautiful princess in the entire world. Charlotte giggled with delight and gave her grandfather a big hug, being careful not to knock off his crown, which still sat on a nearby table. Louis was completely fascinated by his grandfather's golden crown, which had been placed carefully on a special cushion. The 4-year-old boy kept staring at it with wide, curious eyes. The crown seemed to glow in the soft afternoon light, and Louis thought it was the most amazing thing he had ever seen in his life. Can I try it on, Grandpa? Louis asked with the innocent directness that only small children possess. His question made everyone in the room burst into laughter. The idea of tiny Louis wearing the massive Stedward's crown was both adorable and amusing. King Charles picked up his youngest grandson and let him touch the crown gently, while explaining how heavy and special it was. William watched his father interacting with the 3 children and felt his heart fill with love and gratitude. Despite all the ceremony and tradition and responsibility, they were still just a normal family celebrating an important milestone together. Charles was not just the King of England in this moment. He was also a loving grandfather enjoying time with his grandchildren. Kate had tears in her eyes as she observed this beautiful family scene unfolding before her. She thought about how much their lives had changed in just one day. This morning Charles had been a prince waiting to become king. Now he was the monarch, and her husband was officially the heir to the throne. Her children were now one step closer to their own royal destinies. The lunch conversation flowed easily between serious topics about the day's significance and light-hearted family jokes and stories. Louis told everyone about the pretty horses he had seen during the carriage procession. Charlotte described how it felt to wave at thousands of people from the palace balcony. George talked about meeting some of the other royal children from different countries who had attended the ceremony. King Charles shared some of his own memories from the day, including moments that the family had not been able to see. He described the feeling of the heavy crown being placed on his head and the overwhelming emotion of finally achieving his life's purpose. He talked about looking out at the congregation and seeing familiar faces alongside world leaders and dignitaries. The private celebration continued late into the afternoon, with the family savoring these precious moments together before they would have to return to their official duties and public appearances. As evening began to fall over London, the royal family finally returned to the quiet comfort of Adelaide Cottage. The children were completely exhausted from their long and exciting day. George had performed his page boy duties perfectly. Charlotte had charmed everyone she met with her sweet personality and beautiful dress. Louis had provided some much-needed humor and innocence during the most formal parts of the ceremony. Kate helped each child get ready for bed while they chattered excitedly about everything they had experienced. George could hardly believe that he had played such an important role in his grandfather's coronation. Charlotte kept talking about how pretty she had looked in her tiara and special dress. Louis was still fascinated by the golden crown and kept asking when he might get to wear one himself. After all 3 children were finally tucked into their beds and had fallen asleep, William and Kate sat quietly together in their cozy living room. The house felt wonderfully peaceful after the chaos and excitement of the historic day. They were both still processing everything that had happened and what it all meant for their family's future. "Can you believe it?" Kate asked softly as she curled up next to William on their comfortable sofa. "Charles is actually the king now. After all these years of waiting, it finally happened. Her voice was filled with wonder and emotion as she thought about the incredible transformation they had witnessed. William shook his head in amazement as he put his arm around his wife. "And George did so well today. I was so proud of him up there. He handled all that pressure like a real professional." William's voice was warm with fatherly pride as he remembered watching his eldest son perform his ceremonial duties without making a single mistake. They talked quietly about how Charlotte had absolutely loved being the center of attention during the balcony appearance. The little girl had waved at the crowds with such natural grace and charm. She seemed to have been born for royal life and public appearances. Kate and William both laughed as they remembered some of Charlotte's funnier moments throughout the day. Louis had been the source of many smiles and chuckles with his innocent questions and observations. The 4-year-old boy had no idea how important and historic this day had been. To him, it was just a fun day when everyone got dressed up fancy and lots of people came to visit. His childlike wonder and simplicity had helped keep everyone grounded during the most overwhelming moments. But mostly William and Kate found themselves reflecting on what this day meant for their family's future. William was now officially the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. Someday he would follow in his father's footsteps and become king himself. The responsibility felt enormous and slightly frightening when he really thought about it seriously. George would eventually follow William as the next heir to the throne. The little boy who had been so nervous about his page boy duties would someday have to carry the weight of the entire monarchy on his shoulders. William hoped that he would be able to prepare George for that responsibility, just as his own father had prepared him. Kate thought about how their lives would change now that William had officially become the Prince of Wales. There would be more public duties and royal engagements. The children would face more scrutiny and attention from the media and the public. She worried about how to keep them grounded and normal, while also preparing them for their royal destinies. As William scrolled through photos from the day on his phone, he stopped at one particular image that made him smile broadly. It showed all 3 of his children laughing together on the palace balcony with the cheering crowd visible in the background. Their faces were filled with pure joy and excitement. In that moment, they were not thinking about duty or responsibility, or the weight of royal tradition. "Look at this picture," William said, showing the photo to Kate. "This is what I want to remember most about today. Not all the ceremony and formality, but this moment when they were just happy children enjoying an incredible experience." Kate looked at the photo and felt tears forming in her eyes. The image captured something beautiful and precious about their family. The future stretched ahead of them, filled with both challenges and opportunities. There would be difficult times and moments of doubt, but there would also be joy and pride, and the satisfaction that comes from serving something greater than yourself. Today had shown them that they could handle whatever came their way as long as they faced it together as a loving family.